Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ESMT Berlin. My name is Catalina Stefanescu-Kunze, and I am a professor of management science here at ESMT Berlin, and I'm also the holder of the Deutsche Post Digital Chair. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's open lecture. As an international business school, ESMT Berlin has served as a platform for an exchange for many questions of intellectual concern and of debate. And in fact, it's since 2009 that we have hosted many renowned speakers, many experts, many international leaders who have shared with us their knowledge on a wide diversity of topics. It is my honor today to welcome Simone Menne. She started her career for IT&T, and she later joined Deutsche Lufthansa, where she held a variety of positions before being appointed CFO. She was also a member of the executive board and founded Lufthansa's digital lab here in Berlin. In 2015, she entered the pharmaceutical industry. She became the head of finances at Boehringer Ingelheim, a family-owned company, where she continued to champion new initiatives. Again, she founded a digital lab and paved the way for opening of the shared service center in Manila. Today, Simone Menne serves on the supervisory boards of both BMW and Deutsche Post AG, and as a non-executive board member for Johnson Controls International, based in Dublin. She continues to fight relentlessly for a more inclusive, digitally driven, and open-minded industry. And we are really very happy that she's joining us tonight to share her insights with all of us. Before I pass it on to her, however, I would like to also say a big thank you to our media partners, Der Tagesspiegel and Harvard Business Manager. Please join me in welcoming warmly Simone Menne. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I now am thinking, is it this topic which a lot of people heard a lot already and are saying diversity and inclusion, oh no. Is it the weather or is it the football? That it's not 150 people, but you. But I think having a smaller group makes it easier to discuss. So I hope you will be quite active in asking questions and challenging me about this topic. And yeah, the topic is, of course, why does diversity and inclusion help with the challenges we have today, big companies are having today? Or maybe doesn't it help at all? And first of all, are there any challenges? Well, I think we all see the challenges every day. So the challenges which I see is new technology, is climate change, is demographic development, is skillful workforce, especially here in Germany, and it's also migration. So all these challenges, especially in big German companies, but would say we can say that for the whole of Western Europe, things big companies have to or are facing. Of course, some of them, you can also say they are opportunities, you know, this political correctness that you don't have problems, you have challenges, and all challenges can also be opportunities, of course. Part of it is. I think, and I may touch that during my speech, that new technology should be an opportunity and nothing for German angst. But I see actually in the German environment a lot more angst, a lot more fear, a lot more uncertainty than embracing new technology to really tackle what we see as different developments on all other areas. So, and knowing that, why should now diversity help, and what is it all about inclusion? Well, again, let me step first a little bit backwards. The German industry, big companies as well as mid-sized companies, were very successful in the past years. And why has that happened? Partly because they were all constantly working on their efficiency. And consultants were in and out of the house to work on optimizing the whole company. When I started with Lufthansa, 1991, I've been in Lagos, and we had McKinsey for the first time, which was called Gemeinschaftskosten Project, and the result was, at the end, 25% less headcount and cost. During my 27 years in Lufthansa, I saw McKinsey projects 3 times, and constantly there was a reduction of headcount and of cost. That was necessary to become so successful. On the other hand, it meant standard wherever possible, clear processes where you had Kaizen and you name it, black belts in all kind of techniques. And all this brings a company to a point that you don't allow a workforce or management to think differently than the mainstream. That also fosters very homogeneous teams. And partly, in certain periods, it may be very helpful to have homogeneous teams, because people speak the same language. If you have a board of German economic engineers who all come from RWTH Aachen, they just look at each other and they know what to do. Huh? You mean it this way, and we go this way, and yes, fine, you save time. The problem, of course, is you will not get any new idea because you are all thinking the same. And the challenge now is, how do we get out of the trap of this homogeneous environment in fostering critics and not fostering opportunistic thinking people, in bringing teams, diverse teams together when diversity means it's more difficult to find a common solution. And another point next to this environment, this socializing in a very homogeneous environment, you have also the shareholders' point of view. And also that faces a certain culture which may be against diversity. What do I mean? We have a culture more and more since the last years where we looked at short-term results. It's now going a little bit backwards, and I come to that, but for a long time it was quarterly results, and they constantly had to become better. Shareholders were not interested in diversity of a group, not in a conglomerate, and you see that when you look at the tasks management is getting. When you have a conglomerate, in Lufthansa, I was constantly defending, why do we have a catering and engineering and airlines? Because an investor says, I want to invest only in airline or only in catering or only in an engineering company. I want to decide where I put my money, and I don't want you, management, to decide to put your money. So all the discussions you see with Siemens now, having healthineers, and having also other areas where they are discussing to separate the entities, goes into that direction. So the entrepreneurship, the risk-taking, and the heterogeneous part the investor wants to decide and says to management, you focus on your one single bit, elevators and not elevators and steel, or airline and not airline and catering. This, of course, brings a company into a culture where you are also risk averse and optimizing one thing. And investors will then say, if I want to invest my money into risk, I go to a startup or venture capital. So to give you the examples of the companies I know well, imagine a young person coming to Lufthansa, comes to the board, CFO of Lufthansa, and says, I have a wonderful patent. I have a great idea. It's beaming. It's very small. At the moment, I can only beam eggs. But I'm pretty sure in 5 years' time, if we invest enough, we can beam people and the airline industry will be destroyed. As a CFO of Lufthansa, I would not even be allowed to invest in that person. Because the investor, from whom I got the money, will say, are you crazy? This is a totally stupid idea, this will never work, or if it works, that it's too much risk for me. I was in the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry, I think, is in a dilemma because the pharmaceutical industry is earning money for cures, earns even more money when a sickness is chronic, and does not earn money for avoiding sickness. So if somebody has the great idea, we have a drug to avoid something, will they invest, knowing that they may not do as much profit, which they are incentivized for or paid for? So the education of top management is stay homogeneous, be fast and efficient, make a lot of profit, and don't take risk. All this does not fit in the environment we are having today. And companies are trying a lot to get out of that. So buzzword in all big companies at the moment is agility. I think it's narrative already, but it was agility recently. So be fast and be innovative. And what kind of tools do you have? So you mentioned it. I founded the digital lab here in Berlin for Lufthansa. Digital lab, Lufthansa got prizes, but they were never, or they could never bring their innovation and their culture into the big company. They were just not included. They were even fighting. So experienced top managers said, oh, come on, they are just gaming, they are just playing around, and they have this fancy stuff, and they travel to Silicon Valley, but they do not really know what airline means. When we did the same thing in Böhringer, we said, okay, maybe it's the distance. Maybe they shouldn't be in Berlin. Maybe they should be in Ingelheim. And it's not so easy, actually, to get young talent, digital freaks and nerds to Ingelheim, as you may imagine. Do not know whom of you have been there. Great for red wine, but actually a small town. But we got them because they were inspired by the idea to help, inspired by the idea to do something good. But again, sooner or later, the culture of a big company jumped in. So we had pitches, and then they had to prepare for the pitches, and then they had to do a rehearsal for the pitch for the pitches. So you had a huge bureaucracy just killing the spirit of innovation. So that obviously doesn't work. So innovation You cannot put innovation in a silo, be it a digital lab or a research department. You need an innovative culture and an innovative spirit. You have to get out of this fear of risk-taking. And you have to get a culture which is trying out things. A culture which is accepting mistakes. And this is what you read very often. Of course, this is startup culture. You have this failure or fuck-up nights where people are proud to have made a mistake. And that's obviously totally different in a big company up till now. So now I come to the point. And you cannot change that with processes, and you cannot change that with organograms. You cannot change that with hierarchy. You cannot change that with a book with regulations. You only can change that when you change the culture of the company. And to change the culture of the company, you have to change people. And that doesn't mean necessarily exchange people. Because very often a company is very diverse. You have researchers and accountants, maybe totally different type of people. You have pilots and engineers. Maybe they are closer together. Maybe it's a stereotype. You have people who are thinking about the customer. You have people who think about the employees. So I think you have the opportunity to just mix people. Get them out of their silos and let them think together or discuss together. I also believe it would be helpful to have artists, to just getting a totally new idea. And you have to do that not in workshops, but in a more general way. And this is where we are at diversity. You need diverse teams of experience, of background, international, young, old, and also types. It's quite good to have in a team somebody who wants to do the beaming and says, yes, let's go ahead, and somebody else, be careful, let's discuss it. That can be dangerous. No? And to combine that and then find the good idea, that would be the idea of diversity to bring the company forward. What you have to be careful about, though, is you cannot do constant discussions. Yeah, you can, of course, meet and exchange all kinds of ideas. That means you need transparent processes where you have mechanisms to find out when do we stop the discussion and make a decision. That is a challenge for the management. Yeah, give enough room for the discussion in a limited time, in a diverse team, and listen to every voice actively. And then make the decision and convince everybody, obviously, that they were part of it and they become part of the progress making after that decision. And therefore, you also need inclusion. Inclusion means not only you hire somebody from a different background, but you include that person and the thinking of that person actively in your thinking and your behavior and your art to work. And this is still an issue, obviously, in German boardrooms. When you hire one woman and you have a board of 8, and you say, okay, now we have her here, fine, and we don't include her in a way that we accept her maybe different talking or different behavior, then you will not be successful. Then you just have the typical quota women. So you have to embrace different people. You have to listen to different people. And that could also be, obviously, in a totally male team, where somebody is extrovert and somebody is introvert. Don't allow only the extroverts to be the winners. And we all have to overcome these kind of thinking, because we all have stereotypes in our head. And most probably heard about it, but I recently had an event where somebody was talking about 8 types of people. And she actually showed us pictures of politicians to put them into this typology, whatever this, you know what I mean. And it was a lady, and it was a politician. And she said, well, we have the winners, and the winners go forward, and they are extrovert, and they are fighting, and they are good, and they are men. And we have the loyal people, and they are good in bringing teams together, and they are just good in communication, and these are women. And when I went up the stage, I actually changed my whole speech, because I said, well, what you just told us is the reason why we do not have a first CEO in the DAX in Germany. Because you put people in your head and in our heads into certain buckets. But of course it is an issue, and when we discuss about it, I hear a lot of females saying Andrea Nahles is terrible. Not accepting her because she is a bossy person. So we ourselves as females have the same stereotypes, and sometimes talk even worse about other females than male who say, well, I accept different type of females. So we have to overcome our stereotypes. We have to become aware of that. We have to mix the teams, if possible, steadily. If not, at least for certain projects, especially when they shall be innovative projects. We have to actively work on how do we include different type of people. And what kind of mechanisms do we need for that? And we need processes who make sure that they really work together and they are not fighting each other, and that they really come to a decision and do not just discuss and discuss and discuss and discuss. So, and now I have to look at my notes. Because I just don't want to forget one thing. Yeah. I think, and I talked mainly about big companies at the moment, I think it's not so bad to also discuss, do we really need scale and big companies, if in big companies diversity and inclusion doesn't work? So it could very much be that the idea of an investor, and obviously the proven fact that mid-sized companies were more successful in the last 10 years than the big DAX companies, as long as everybody has a working space and gets the feeling that he or her can contribute to a result of a target and be part of a team, we may have to consider to destroy big hierarchies. And just be very blunt, maybe it's not a bad idea to destroy Thyssen the way it is. Because it's just very, very difficult to bring the changes I was just talking about into an established big culture. And to just maybe do it in smaller parts and then make it more of a startup feeling, that could be a point where we can change that at the moment quite laming, quite slow, quite fearful environment we are having into an environment where I would say, let's embrace innovation. Let's not, and that's maybe another thesis we can discuss because it's provocative, let's not just shrink because we are afraid of climate change, but let's think about innovative ideas to turn it around. And this is what mankind has done in the past. I strongly believe, just to make it a pass at the side, that we should recycle fossil energy several times, because we cannot grow the way we want to grow in the world when we just take fossil energy apart. So we need innovative people to think about that, and not just people saying, okay, we reduce everything we do. We reduce meat. We reduce fossil energy. We reduce cars. We forbid cars. What I mean is, again here, diversity and inclusion could help, in my opinion, to come to a point that people embrace change, embrace innovation, and convince people that we can change it and take the challenge into an opportunity and be more responsible on our own and not just following rules, processes, and big organizations and hierarchies. And that is very blunt now, that is very go forward now. But I think the times are in a way that we cannot necessarily wait to slowly change big things, but there may be areas where we just have to say, okay, I destroy it, I make it different, and what I make different, I make diverse and with inclusion. And then I get a different spirit, like what we all admire about startups, and use the challenges as opportunities. And also, by the way, embrace aged people. I still cannot understand why, at the moment, big companies are complaining about not having skilled workforce, but at the same time still do restructuring programs like 10 years before, and not retrain skilled workforce just because they are 50. And I'm becoming 60 next year, so I'm concerned. So I want to prove it's possible. So again, here, what we are losing opportunities because we are thinking in the old-fashioned way we all were brought up, and partly diversity and inclusion, when it's not to be integrated in a big company, you have to destroy and start anew, as long as you can produce what you produced before even better, and in smaller entities. I was too fast, I think, right? But I stop here for the moment. I can elaborate on some of the other ideas, but are there already now questions, discussion points? I knew some people here so I may ask questions if you do not ask questions, but there is one.
Okay, I wanted to, first a comment, then a question. Some years back, I attended a workshop at the OECD. I was there to work, and it was also on labor. And they were talking about different solutions for sort of the challenges of a new labor force worldwide. And one of the things that really impressed me about one of the groups that I was there with and what they were doing was the way they brought in art and sculpture to help people think outside of the box about these really pressing political issues.
Yeah.
And so they had policymakers in there with cardboard and markers and had them on the floor and building sculptures to try to reimagine what their solutions would be. And so the question is, when you imagine how art or artists can influence this, do you have some examples that you want to share, or could you give some from your own perspective of how they could participate?
I've really like the idea, and actually I'm opening a gallery on the 28th of September where we try to really get the art to inspire the economy or business makers. And I think what we do in our how we bring up people from kid to grown up, we de-skill creative ideas. I think all kids like to paint. How many people, adults, do paint and do not say, oh no, that's not good enough? Huh? Or build with clay. And when you do, and that's a clear science experience, when you do something with brain and hands, and when you really can touch things and build things, you open your mind tremendously to other ideas. And either you can, of course, do workshops with artists. I think I like this artist in-house. Yeah, so we have artists in cities. Why not artists in-house to constantly run around the company and ask and challenge and discuss the art. In Lufthansa, the art was quite hidden. The art was somewhere in the house, and nobody knew that it was art. And then we took the stuff and discussed. Okay, look at this. This door there is it's closed, and there is a chain around it. And what does it mean? And how do you interpret it? And all of a sudden, they were looking at their house totally different, with new ideas. Are we trapped here, for example? So I think art can be a terrible good opener of new ideas, because people start to play around, and they may forget their fears about, I cannot do that. Same, by the way, which works quite well, is if you play theater. Yeah, role plays, where you allow people to do totally different things. Ask them to do totally different things. So the person who is constantly a critic, ask this person to become the person just speaking for the idea, and the ones who is always optimistic just doing it against. So you change perspective, and you see points from a different point of view, which is obviously also very helpful when you change country where you live, or the culture you are living in, to understand that we are strangers nearly everywhere, to understand how strangers feel and how to include strangers. Yeah. So you have to sit yourself into the position of somebody else, and art sets a lot of things free in this regard.
Well, thank you for your input. It was quite inspiring, and it really makes sense for me. But I have a question. I mean, let's imagine you are now a middle-sized company. You are the one part who split away, and you say, well, let's do another culture. Let's think differently. But well, then you have again another shareholder who says, well, let's be efficient, let's make money. And how do you solve that problem?
That's a really good point. I think we have partly you don't have the choice who your shareholder is, definitely, and when you are a listed company, you're free float. I think you need a very good narrative, and when you see sometimes what is happening is investors start to follow narratives. They do that with Tesla, yeah, and sometimes you think that's beyond reason what they do there and how much they support it. So I think the only way out of that trap is definitely get a narrative where you convince the investor that part of the invested money is venture capital. And you find that nowadays in very small size within companies. So part of my budget as a CFO, because I was sort of the neutral person, we took away as venture capital. So I think what you have to do is be very transparent and say, this is my budget planning, this is my 5-year plan, and so much I do on risky projects, but I can be very transparent about the opportunities there. Or, which is also obviously very often a discussion, I do it on cannibalism. Yeah, I do projects or products in my own house who cannibalize my old-fashioned product. Typical example, which didn't happen at that time, but the mainframe from IBM and the PC. IBM did not invest in PCs because they said we are good in mainframe, and PC will never be a big thing, and they are a lot less efficient, and therefore we don't invest in PCs. So you have to really challenge yourself in this regard and ask your shareholder to go with you. And partly the shareholder may not do, they may then not invest, but I think you will find money. And the interesting part is, when you think about family-owned companies, that very often in family-owned companies who do think more in 2 generations, that they support strategic investments in more long-term risky things. So it's I think it's a very open book policy with the investors you need there.
Also, thank you from my side, and I'm coming from a company, Springer Nature, who invests a lot in diversity and inclusion, so you spoke nearly everything from my heart.
I'm coming from that company too. I just had a meeting there this afternoon.
Yeah, and it was forgotten in your introduction that you are a board member of Springer Nature, so maybe I can add to that.
We should mention that,
but
yeah.
Being Berlin-based, so that's... I agree with nearly everything you said, and it's from my heart. The one idea I'm struggling a bit is your idea to destroying larger companies or structures in order to build more diversity, inclusion, and innovative centers where we think we admire startups. Now, I've seen many situations where if you build innovation centers, or there's even a book called Disrupted, about a person entering a startup and found out actually the startup was it was different. It was diverse than what he experienced, but in itself, it was a very narrow culture and another kind of bubble. Yeah. So I think that there must be something, if you do that, in order to achieve the goal, in order to not create the next non-diverse but different environment, there must be some construction principles or lessons learned or something added on top in order to be successful with it. Could you share a bit what your thoughts about that, what these principles could be, and to avoid that trap?
Well, definitely, you find a lot of startups which are terrible homogeneous and are not diverse at all. Again, I believe long-term successfulness is diversity. But it can only come from the CEO of the supervisory board. So you need mechanisms, yes, and these mechanisms will partly be rules. How diverse do we want to be? So when I was in Boehringer, we set ourselves the target 30% female, also in the board, all management areas, 25% Generation Y, 25% international. And actually, at that time, the supervisory board said, you don't know what you're doing, and you will not be able to handle that, because it will just be too much. Yeah. So again, I think what I meant is I wouldn't be scared to take a company like Thyssen and make 6 parts out of it, and then they are still not necessarily diverse and innovative. Absolutely true. But you have a smaller entity, which a more focused narrative, so people can understand better what are we working for, what is my part in this. You don't have, or you have the right owner most probably at the moment. Or you would take Lufthansa again. I think Lufthansa was never the right owner for the catering. They never got the money they needed, because the money was needed for the airplanes. So it may be absolutely right to say, yes, make a small entity with an owner who is embracing catering or the other parts of Thyssen, and then, as management, find ways to implement the inclusion or the diversity and inclusion. And partly, I think you can be bold enough to look at your workforce and say, why not just mixing an accountant and put them into a customer relation part? And I love the idea. Allianz did their customer claims to the innovation department. And that's a brilliant idea, because normally people working in customer claims hate customers. Yeah, the customer is a burden there. Oh, he's complaining and I have to solve it. And you all realize that most probably very often in your daily life. I do, that you only get a tape, you only get stupid letters. When you put that into innovation, you turn the whole thing around, because then you think that complaint could be a great idea to become better. And to talk to the customer and ask them what was the problem and how can we become better, even you get the customer more attached to your company. So mixing people with different mindset, and not in an avalanche, yeah? Not mixing everything all totally and they do not know what to do. But you can do steps, I think, where you can achieve that. And you obviously can achieve that easier in smaller entities than in the very big ones.
It's Christian Berg from the Albright Stiftung. We're trying to get more women on top positions in Germany and in Swedish businesses. My question is, you were saying that the big companies have very big problems to change because there's quite a lot of hierarchies, because they are not ready to change, or if you also bring other smaller innovations into the companies. But what you see sometimes is when you have big companies coming to bigger challenges, when you have a crisis, at least from my point of view, you see that you often then certainly decide that, yes, we can also have women, we can also have other people in our groups, in our leading positions. I'm just thinking, now we're discussing about these German companies that have 10 years of successes or more years, and now we see signs of maybe that the outlook doesn't look so bright as it was before. Is that a challenge or an opportunity for the companies if there are more crises, more disruption, that we also have more diversity? Or do you see it in the other way, that when it will be more difficult times, that they will say that, okay, we don't want to have to do anything about diversity and anything like that, or experiment or innovation, we just focus on our main core business?
Depends very much from the company. But I totally agree with you that a crisis can be absolutely an opportunity. you dare to do more things, and you are more innovative when you are not when you are living in different times. I've been with British Midland. British Midland was a small airline with actually 3 different parts of airline. The low-cost carrier of British Midland had 12 planes. You know, from the very beginning that cannot work. So we had to restructure. I think we had the most innovative and most efficient way to do the cabin. And we didn't look at all at we took everybody who was, we were embracing diversity. We were in the Midlands, finding people in the Midlands, again, skilled people. You didn't look at a homogeneous part. On the other hand, when you, especially the CEO, thinks he has to do crisis management in a way that he doesn't want discussions, he wants to make clear cut saying this is the way we are doing, then you will find a more homogeneous culture, I would say, and continue with that. And the problem, obviously, at the moment is, and that's really a catch-22, think about automotive, think about BMW. The biggest margin at the moment all car companies are doing is SUVs. And obviously, because of this very tragic accident, you may have all read that you have so many people buying SUVs, a lot more than people who want to buy an electric car. Electric cars at the moment cost money for a car producer. So what shall you do as a manager when you have high margin product here, low margin product there? You are asked to produce profit. At the same time, you know that in 20 years you have to produce mobility. That's a really catch. Yeah? That's a really catch. And to get that point, Springer, yeah, open access and printed articles. How do you switch? How do you get the transformation? And I think being in that situation could be a huge opportunity because you still have money, you still can earn a lot of money in the US or whatever with big cars, take that money and do it into a different mobility platform. But most of them are doing it in a different company. So the joint venture Daimler and BMW is a different company because you have a culture where people since 100 years are proud producers of fast, beautiful looking cars. And to change that and say, well, by the way, that's not the good thing anymore, that's the bad thing, it's very difficult to bring that to the people. So you better develop, and you can use people from your company, develop another platform and then switch slowly. But again, as I said, it's a little bit a case study, what to do in what situation of a company. Definitely crisis is an opportunity, yeah. But for Thyssen, I'm not so sure.
Thank you very much for the inspiring words. I certainly subscribe to what you've said. Can I take you one step further? You started your speech with highlighting the 5 key worldwide challenges, as you pointed them. Let's assume we were not talking about a corporate, but about society. So if you think about people in countries that I would call are the left behinds, people that feel marginalized, people that were growing up in old economy, how would you bring those on board to your theme of diversity and inclusion? Or may it be that what you've said really works better the smaller the group that you were looking into? I mean, you made the case for mid-sized companies versus big giants. Is there a case to be made that if you go one step further and include the entire society, it would make things just inoperable? And you have to concentrate in smaller patches and be innovative in, say, in communities, for instance, rather than looking at the whole country.
I think it's not neither nor. I very strongly believe that, take the issue of climate change, that a city like Kiel can do a lot in their own region about climate change. We are actually discussing things we can do there. At the same time, you have to solve climate change on a global level, so it's also better that you have an opinion on the European level. So you have to scale somehow. What you can do in the small groups is develop ideas, but they should be diverse groups. So what we are discussing at the moment, I'm a little bit also attracted to what can we do with Europe. Try to make people in cities, 30 cities in Europe, in diverse groups, write a constitution for Europe. Get the people involved. Hear what they want to do. And you have to include politics, you have to include economy, companies, you have to include people who feel left behind, you have to include migrants. But when they write together a constitution, thinking about their hometown, but then scale it to Europe, this is how I think how you could do things like that. Yeah, and I think it's obviously very, very difficult to reach people who feel already so left behind that they will not just accept any for them stupid idea like that. So we have to find different ideas to really close the social gap. And I could imagine, not knowing the model exactly, but I could imagine bedingungsloses Grundeinkommen, so basic salary without reason. Yeah, if it's well done, I think you take the fear from people who are totally losers, and you may give them self-esteem to start something in a different way, and then you may win them again for the society to become part of that. But it's definitely very, very important for politicians to make inclusion, and in communities, it very often happens. There are lots of offers for that. So I think it would work similar. We have... It was here.
Hello, my name is Gabriela Maria Gerlach. I'm from the consulting company Living Diversity. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested in one point. When we speak about big companies, huge companies like DAX companies, it's the reason for diversity is very often based in economical reasons. What do we get out of diversity? Mm-hmm. What is a connection to our profit and things like that? And on the other hand, that is a reason for diversity, which is absolutely fine to say, what do we get out of it? The second reason can be driven by law, like the Allgemeines Gleichbehandlungsgesetz, which is fine as well. But there is a third reason, and the third reason is the ethical and moral reason, because it is a reason for diversity, saying that we want to have diversity, that we want to have more female top management and things like that. Do you think it is, or how important would you say is to hire top management person in big companies who really want to have diversity, for whom it is not only lip service and driven by economic reason or law reasons, but also by moral and ethical reasons? What do you think about this?
It's essential. It's essential. To really change a culture in an existing system, you need the CEO and the supervisory board who strongly believe in that, and who strongly believe, and not necessarily for profit, but strongly believe it's just good, it's just normal. And as soon as that happens, you see a lot of changes. And when you look in some companies where you had a change of a CEO, you may monitor that. As long as the board is not fully convinced that it's good, especially when they only do it for the law, it will not help, because then they are not including. Yeah? Because then they cannot include, because they are not convinced that to take somebody into the team who is different is good for the whole or for themselves. So it's essential that you have strong believers. And that is, there was an interesting comment this morning in the radio asking the questions if we have the right leaders at the moment, because they are coming from a recent time. We have to change the leaders into that direction. Yeah, I'm absolutely convinced. If not, you will not change. But on the other hand, then you may not change, then you may become bankrupt, and then somebody else can grow up a company with a diverse team. Mm-hmm.
So thank you again for the lecture. I want to pick up on this point. Actually, I'm a teacher and I'm a student of social policy as well. So I'm also interested in this idea that corporates perhaps have this social responsibility, ethical responsibility to diversify, to be more inclusive. Picking up on what you just said, then how does one go about convincing those corporates that it is a matter of social responsibility as well, to address maybe underrepresentation of various groups that have been, traditionally marginalized and so on? How do we go about that, in your opinion?
Well, the point is, of course, again, just thinking you're social responsible and you have to show that will not be sufficient. What helps sometimes is having a training about unconscious bias, just to find out where your weak spots are, and everybody has that. Yeah. So to find out, is it sick people? Is it old people? Is it colored people? Is it female? What is it? What I think about these different types, and do I believe that thick people are lazy and therefore they cannot become a really successful manager? Yeah? And when I know that, it could help. But I think that will only be a small bit. You really need people who want to have a mixed team and embrace it and love it and have their own work experience being successful because of that. And to change people is very, very difficult. And you see that quite often. And I'll give you 2 examples. Even companies who have in their social responsibility and whatever, all kind of claims regarding diversity, when you dig into it, you still find out the first 2 levels, there are not too many females, for example. Yeah. And then they make up, yes, we have this diversity in the middle management, but there is still a ceiling, and so it is not sufficient when they are not convinced. And the example I want to give, and I talked about it with several people already tonight. There is a movie about. The 3rd of October, there will be the festivities for the public holiday, for the unification. It will be in Kiel, so my hometown. And there is this movie about how great it will be and how wonderful it will be. And I think our Prime Minister of the state of Schleswig-Holstein is a very open person and young. The movie shows 5 minutes or whatever, maybe 50 people, 2 females, and both are decorative sitting around somewhere, and the males are all doing things. They are sailing, they are repairing, they are producing, they are active. And we all are brought up so much with these stereotypes from when we are kids. Or I recently heard a speech. It is clearly, and that's something for Albright, I think, it is proven if you put a baby into a pink or into a blue, what is it called, sweater, whatever, strampler, people treat that kid differently. So it starts with the first, when you are 3 weeks old. And we have to bring kids to a point that they embrace diversity and make good experiences. Only then you can really change. And to change, I put some names now, but to change Carsten Spohr, or to change Mr. Lehner, or to change Mr. Käser is not possible anymore. It's not possible anymore. And they what are you saying? They are cloning their successors. And their successors will be the same. Yeah, that's the concern. This is why I'm in supervisory boards, and I hope that I have some impact there. Further questions? No?
I actually just have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I almost think now that we should not sit around talking like that, but just be one more active. So thank you very much for the insights tonight. What I find fascinating is that you're speaking from your broad range of experiences in various companies and across a variety of industries as well. Would you say that the impact that diversity and inclusion has on a company's performance and culture varies across the industries, or would you say that it's about the same extent? In other words, are there maybe companies that could say we are foolproof, we don't need to worry, or do you say this is a universal?
Oh, there are, and when you read the statistics from Albright, you will see that, and you also see that they are successful. There are some top companies where you have 50-50, and they are great performers. Yeah? And there are some companies, and also them I name, I think Zalando is still an issue. They do not have females, Vielmann. So there are some companies who just do not have females. For the DAX companies, I do not see much of a difference or variety. Yeah, but when you go through the statistics and the publications of Albright, you see that there are differences, and they are not necessarily depending from the industry, but from the leader. Areal Bank has a female CEO and a female chair of supervisory board.
Right. So you've touched on a couple of biases which also came out from the questions and in the discussion. And you made a very strong argument why diversity and inclusion are good also from a shareholder perspective in terms of risk diversification. But what I find interesting is also the fact that there are frictions and loss of efficiency that come with diversity, and it's important to recognize those, of course.
Yep.
So, you know, it's between this tension between, okay, we're incurring a risk here, and particularly in a corporate culture that's extremely risk averse. What do you think would be the main lever for solving this tension? Because it's not just diversity and inclusion, it also goes to other corporate decisions that corporates are taking.
Yeah. Well, I hope, and partly you see that already, see that especially in the States, that investors are asking for diversity. Actually, in Johnson Controls, we got feedback from investors about the diversity of the board. Also talking about age. So they say and believe that it's, and there are statistics showing that diverse teams are more successful. Of course, you have to train your management how to act with a diverse team. Yeah, that's a different challenge. And the culture in the boardroom, but also in other areas, is different then. And this is what I meant with the processes. You have to encourage discussion, You have to encourage different viewpoints, but you have to set yourself a target when you make the decision, not continue. And another problem which you very often see in companies is that you make a decision and then somebody else is coming with a different argument and then you revise the decision. And the whole workforce doesn't understand why and the investors do not understand why. So I think this is key, that you have a very good decision process and then go ahead. So you have to train your management to tackle diversity, but then it is more successful. And nowadays there are several investors, big ones in the US, strongly believe in that.
So it's interesting that you took the corporate view and the stakeholder view, but also going down a little bit more to the individual level and to the mental processes that people go through on both sides of the equation in terms of increasing diversity and inclusion. It's basically evolutionary ingrained that birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
And so homophily, simply hanging out with people who are like us, it's a very strong construct. Yeah. So to go against it, to make the case against it, seems like an uphill struggle to some extent.
Well, it's easier in companies than in any other area. Maybe in the politics, because in companies you just can say that's the rule.
Right.
In a family party it may not be, yeah, and obviously, yes, it's true. You find if sooner or later during a party that a lot of females are hanging out somewhere in the kitchen and some males somewhere, whatever, and it's not bad as such. Yeah, I think we totally have to accept, and this is diversity, that we are coming from different viewpoints, and that for some things we like to hang out together with somebody, a person, a crowd who's similar to me. But you can force that you have teams which are diverse, and you can allow female networks, whatever networks, LGBT networks, to give people the opportunity also to come together with the same mindset people.
So using social tools as well to reinforce the message.
I would enforce that more in the area of special networking or special events or things like that.
But I find it interesting because obviously you talked about diversity in a general term, but if you think about gender diversity in particular, which is a hot topic, and there's even regulations about this, to what extent do you feel that at the moment of recruitment or later on moment of promotions or at any point in the funnel, women are perhaps held at a different standards than men, also partly to mitigate the perceived risk-taking of increasing diversity. So to give you an example, sometimes you look at CVs of candidates and you see them as like, well, yeah, I mean, it's very strong technically, clearly strong performance, but she's maybe not warm enough. That is a comment that I've actually personally heard. And
there is really one thing, and that's a sentence I hate when it comes about recruitment or promotion of women, because nearly all times somebody, normally a male person, says she is not yet there. There's just this little bit still missing. So she needs P&L responsibility, or she needs to go outside, so it constantly happens, and that's only a reason because you have a stereotype and have the feeling maybe this female is not as strong because of our stereotype. Females are not as targeted or as whatever. So I see that. On the other hand, I also see, and that comes with how are we socialized, that a lot of females obviously shy away. And when you have, and you are in a recruitment process and you have a male candidate and a female candidate, and the male candidate says, don't worry, yes, I did that before and I know what to do, and I solve you that problem. And the female says, by the way, this part I did not yet any cover, and I'm not sure if I maybe need some more time. Whom will you take? Yeah, so I can only give a good advice to females: don't do that. And I recently had a telephone call with a lady which I recommended for a supervisory board, and it was the day before she met the chair. And she said, yeah, and I will obviously say that this is my first supervisory board, and I'm not sure if I'm fully into the topic already and whatever. And I said, and you don't do that. You say, I know Mrs. Achleitner, I know Mrs. Menne, I had a course, and I'm an experienced manager. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's and of course we are socialized that way. But we have to train to overcome that.
Yeah.
And third reason, of course, is that very often females do the decision to make a pause during their education for their kids, and you lose 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is another issue. So we have, and I think that's part of the reason why Germany doesn't work as well as Scandinavia. We have this very strong socializing, which is stronger. So women feel bad when they go to work and have kids. We have tax rules which obviously make it force a pair to make a decision, shall one work or the other, and not like in Sweden, everybody has to work for its own pension, and we don't have this Ehegattensplitting. You have not so good care facilities for kids, which, by the way, is not the main reason, but is because that's the same in the US, and despite that, you have female top managers, and you have a socializing where women still shy away from responsibility.
Yeah.
And partly, also that has to be admitted, there are women who do not promote women.
Yeah. It's basically an ingrained problem.
Yeah, the bee queen example where a woman feels very, very good, being pampered and being well treated because she's the only one.
Yeah. Now we are here in a business school, so obviously we are in an education industry. What would you say that could be done by higher education institutions, by business schools in particular, to
Definitely bring female in your courses. I have been here last year by invitation of a participant of a management course, a female participant. She said, I have been in a course here, and in all lectures I had male presenters. Could you please come? So you have to force, and it's the same like in a supervisory board. The lady I just were talking about, that was a male chair who was sitting at a panel with me and said, I couldn't find a female for my supervisory board. And I said, and next time you're looking for one, you give me a phone call and I bring you one. It is an excuse.
Yeah.
And you find women who will be on panels. Never do a panel without a diverse 50-50 panel. Have best 50-50 lecturers. Have diverse teams. I've been with KPMG, a partner meeting, upcoming partners, 40 years old, 40, 45, one female, and she was a part-timer. I said, you are inviting me to such a course? And I tell that everything. I tell every consultant, show me a project team which is diverse. Every banker, show me your females. Every school, where are the female professors, but also where are the female panels, where are the lecturers? Yeah. So that is that is key.
Oh, we'll definitely have our work cut out for us.
Good. And I'm happy to come.
Thank you so much. We're always happy to have you back. Any further questions? Thank you very much again.
Thanks a lot.